You may have heard this term before, Waka jumping, but you may not understand how it works in New Zealand law or its political ramifications. So allow me to explain the concept that some have labelled as a no-brainer law, while others have labelled it as an affront to democracy.
I can smell the uranium on it as you lean towards it.
Okay, Boomer.
We have the most enormous big gay rainbow across my electorate.
They're not going to win an election.
Let's keep moving!
In New Zealand, we have a parliament that's made up of 120 members, who are all elected to their seats by the voters every 3 years. We use a mixed member proportional voting system, or MMP, to elect these representatives, which has a voter vote for a local representative within their electorate, and also gives them a second vote for a political party, and seats are delegated out based on a combination of both of these votes. Only 72 of the 120 members represent local electorates, the other 48 members being known as list MPs, members of parliament who got their seats based on their position on the party list and through the party vote, without a voter needing to directly vote for them. This essentially means that even though the order of the party list is public knowledge before the election, 48 seats in parliament are basically decided by party leaders, opposed to the will of the actual voter. So the question is, what is to be done with a member of parliament who choose not to vote the same as their party? Or are they allowed to vote however they wish and even leave their party and join other parties? This isn't even a thought experiment. New Zealand has a history of MPs changing party, especially in the late 90s and early 2000s. While in 2018, the Labour New Zealand First coalition government passed the Electoral Integrity Amendment Bill to make it illegal to so-called Waka jump, a Kiwi-centric term that basically means MP changing parties after an election. The legislation states that if a member of parliament that was elected to parliament through the party list was to quit or be fired from their party, they would be instantly ejected from parliament and their seat would become vacant. If this were to happen to an MP that was elected to represent an electorate, they would actually get to keep their seat and become an independent MP. The second part actually happened in late 2018, where the Botany electorate MP Jamie Lee Ross quit the National Party and became an independent and held on to a seat for the remainder of his term. So let's look at the arguments for and against the Waka jumping law. Opponents of the law, like the Green Party, would say that the Waka jumping law restricts the voice of dissenting members of parliament and basically gives too much power to party leaders. They claim it overrides the will of the voter, who elected MPs for a term. It ignores the voters' wishes, if a leader can just kick out whoever they want in parliament and just replace them with a new member. Now let's look at the supporters of the law and the arguments that they make. Disclosure, I'm one of the supporters of this law. They claim that when you vote for a party with your party vote, you're not actually voting for an individual who is on the party list. You're specifically voting for the policies and ideals of the party. Let's look at the MP Helen White from the Labour Party as an example. She ran the Auckland City electorate and was number 50 on Labour's party list. She lost her electorate race to the Greens' Chloe Swarbrick, but got a seat based on Labour's unusually high party vote. Now tomorrow in Parliament, should she be allowed to stand up and go, "Hey all, I've decided that I no longer like the Labour Party," and peace out and join the National Party, taking her seat and her vote with her? No, that would be insane. Voters came out and specifically voted for Labour, not Helen White to change parties whenever she wants. If the voters wanted National to have that seat, they would have voted for National, but they didn't. They voted for Labour, so Labour should have the seat for the whole term. Legislation similar to the 2018 law had been passed in 2001 by Helen Clark's Labour government, but it had a sunset clause, stating that the law would be automatically repealed in 2005 if the government didn't choose to renew the law, which they didn't, allowing Waka jumping to resume in New Zealand. The way the 2018 law passed is actually a very interesting story. So in the 2017 election, the New Zealand First Party ran on this policy, stating that Waka jumping legislation would be a deal breaker for them to form a coalition. This led the Labour Party to give in to these demands during private negotiation meetings. But New Zealand First and Labour did not have enough votes in Parliament to pass this law, or even form a government for that matter. They had to rely on the small Green Party to bolster up numbers and give them a working majority. These three parties never sat down with one another. New Zealand First and the Greens, both having separate agreements with Labour.
It has just said then that if you wanted to get a decent deal in coalition, you should have got him to do the negotiating. What do you make of that?
He wouldn't talk to us during negotiations.
No agreement was ever signed between all three parties. In their agreement with Labour, the Greens promised to act in good faith and help Labour pass legislation through Parliament. So after the deals were all signed, the Greens were faced with a problem, that they had to vote for the Waka jumping legislation, a law that they felt was an affront to democracy, because Labour promised it to New Zealand First.
Swallowing a dead rat, is that how you see it?
No, we certainly don't like this bill. It is through our confidence and supply agreement that we are voting in support of this bill.
Well, where does it say in the coalition, in the confidence and supply agreement?
So it's through the good faith that we uphold with Labour. Labour are in the coalition agreement, and this is one of the compromises, not one that we enjoy, and I certainly acknowledge our previous leaders and members who have spoken out about this.
We'll get to that, but I can't see. I had another look at the coalition, the confidence and supply agreement this morning, and I can't find it. Can you?
It's in the good faith cause.
But it doesn't say that you have to support this bill?
It doesn't at all say specifically, but it is in the good faith negotiation with Labour, and it is through that we are bound to uphold this particular legislation.
Just before the 2020 election though, the Greens did a sneaky manoeuvre. They partnered with the centre-right National Party to bring forward legislation that would overturn the walking jumping law that they were forced to pass.
We voted for the repeal of the party hopping bill. Why? Because we've got a 20-year position against that. The only reason that... Because it was contained in the New Zealand First Coalition Agreement, and we had an agreement with the Labour Party that we would uphold the New Zealand First Coalition Agreement.
So you've done a bit of work around to... He's saying you can't be trusted.
No, it's funny, if you read the New Zealand First Coalition Agreement, what it says is to enter and pass a party hopping bill into Parliament. We did that, didn't say anything else, and I'm told words matter.
This bill is currently in committee, even after the 2020 election, and we are unsure if we're going to see it on the floor of Parliament. Now that New Zealand First is no longer in Parliament, we will see if the majority Labour government will remove the walkie jumping legislation from New Zealand law, or if they're just going to leave it alone and hope that people don't notice that this New Zealand First policy is still around. I may not like Wizard Peters or New Zealand First very much personally, but I'm honest enough to say that I think the walkie jumping rule is a no-brainer. It makes total sense, regardless of being a New Zealand First initiative. It is not an affront to democracy to understand that voters are not actually looking at the party list. They do not know who is number 40 on Labour's party list or number 38 on National's. So it would be silly to think that voters are voting for those individuals opposed to the party's official platforms. So please, Jacinda, don't overturn the walkie jumping legislation.